Hello everybody, Jonathan Reeves here with another Vectorworks with Lumion tutorial. So today we're going to look at another project that I modelled in Vectorworks a little while ago for a new sort of eco-home. It was really an earth-sheltered eco-home, and you can see here I was using the Vectorworks site modelling tools to look at the project in its context. You can see how the building sort of nestled quite nicely into the site. And we've got a couple of nice renders that I did already. But what we're going to do today, we're going to take a look at how this might translate into some nice renderings and animations using Lumion, which I'm kind of been experimenting with. So basically I'm going to click onto the sync with Lumion from Vectorworks, Lumion Live Sync. And essentially, basically with one click, we can open up the Lumion window. And I'm just going to kind of minimize that so we can get dual screen. And you can see that we've now synced into Lumion from Vectorworks. So that's pretty neat. It's very straightforward and easy. And the good thing is, as you walk through in the Vectorworks model, you can immediately see the changes happening on the screen on the right, the Lumion screen. If you make any design changes to the model, then those will immediately be updated in your Lumion scene as well. So that's really, really cool. For example, when I delete that tree, you can see that's deleted in the Lumion model. Okay, so this live syncing between your CAD or BIM software is very, very welcome. So what we're going to do now is basically start to work on the landscape a little bit. And you can see I've basically selected the place tool. We're just going to place a few trees and just adjust the weather and things. I really love the way that you can just adjust the clouds and the sky and the time in Lumion. That's very, very straightforward and easy to do. And basically kind of swap out some of the materials. So we're just going to swap out this grass for a lot more realistic sort of Lumion type grass. And we'll just go for a kind of regular one at the moment, not the detailed one. Let's change the glass as well. Again, the Lumion glass is going to be a lot more high quality than the Vectorworks one. And let's kind of just walk forward a little bit and change out this render as well. So you can see that the library that ships with Lumion, the material library, is actually really quite comprehensive. And obviously, like all these softwares, all of these can be fine-tuned as required. So that's pretty cool. So let's just swap out this sort of grass roof here and see what we can use. I think we'll go for something a bit more detailed. So some detailed 3D grass would be good here. So you can see there's some quite nice different varieties. We'll go for this one, the clear-cut grass, and see how that looks. I think while we're here, we'll also change some of the metals as well. So I'm not doing a massive amount of work on the actual materials. Most of these have come through quite nicely from Vectorworks. But I think, you know, it's definitely worth swapping out some of the major sort of bigger area materials. You're going to get much nicer textures and things like that. So one of the real strong points of Lumion is the fact that it's got a really good library of trees and plants. And you can see we're just going on to the place tool to place some individual trees and plants. But when you're ready, you can also go to the brush placement. Wow, that was a lot. And basically, you can basically paint and spray different sort of amounts of trees and plants and things in one go. I would recommend you play with the density and get that down a little bit lower than I had it before. Let's just place a few more individuals. I actually like the individual accuracy of placing these, and it's still pretty fast. So unless you're doing very, very big forests and things, you don't really need to use the mass placement tool that often. There's a few other nice options which we'll come on to later, like the linear placement and also the cluster option as well. So that's cool. So I'm just going to keep working and refining these materials. So I'm going to get some sort of asphalt for that road. That makes it look a bit more realistic there. And let's kind of keep working. I think I'm going to actually delete a few of those trees. So go back onto the delete mode. And when you're on the tree tab, you can actually select those individual trees and just delete them as required. And you can see them being highlighted there and just delete them, no problem at all. So that's looking better. We've kind of tidied up that forested area where I oversprayed the trees a little bit too rapidly. Let's zoom into the building a bit more and get into the foreground a little bit more. And what we'll do is we'll just create our first sort of still. Because it's always good, actually, I think, when you're creating these images, just to kind of early on, just map out the kind of images that you might think about creating, get the views right, so that when you actually work out the images, you can kind of specifically work on those particular images. So, for example, for this image here, I'm quite keen just to get some nice trees and plants and sort of bushes into the foreground here. and that really kind of makes that image come alive. So yeah, I definitely recommend, choose some of the images as you're working, don't leave it all to the end, and that's going to really help in terms of sort of placing stuff, just to get a bit of visual interest. So I'm going to work on the area close to the building. Let's place some of those plants there, kind of get some flowers into the model, just to kind of get some colour. And using a little bit of colour to break up this massive green will really help our visual. And I think kind of placing a few in a line here. So here I'm using the linear place tool. And the nice thing with this tool is what you can do is you can actually click to add, or you can subtract a number of different elements. So when you kind of drag, as you can see, this sort of linear line, and I can get that lined up nicely with my patio here, I can change the density and things like the rotation and the scale and the amount of plants that we see. So again, let's just kind of do that same thing over here, just to place that along there, kind of get it lined up a bit with that patio there, and maybe choose a sort of similar mixture of plants for that kind of little, bed of flowers and plants. So that's looking really cool. Okay, so let's just keep working on maybe looking at the foreground here, and we'll place a few more plants in this area here. And I think what we'll do is actually just kind of go to the individual place mode now. Just place a few of these different types of bushes. So for me, the Lumion library is pretty good. This is just the trial of Lumion, so I'm not sure if the professional version has a bigger library, but it is actually pretty comprehensive just on the trial. So if you haven't tried the trial, I recommend you give it a go. You get 14 days, and you can actually create some really nice images just on the trial before you kind of decide if you want to kind of go ahead and take it a bit further. So, with all these real-time rendering softwares like Twinmotion and Enscape and Lumion, it's definitely worth giving them a go to see which one you prefer. And each one has advantages and disadvantages in terms of sort of, interface and speed of use and rendering quality, that kind of thing. So we're just going to go ahead and create another couple of stills. I really love the way that when you click the still, it does make a little camera noise and it flashes like a camera flash. That's cool. So yeah, it's looking quite nice, this particular image. This has potential to be a really nice image. But I always think it does look good if you get some trees in the foreground, maybe just sort of masking that building slightly. And I'm going to go down a bit to eye level. So one of the differences with Twinmotion and Lumion, for example, is you have different modes in Lumion. So you have like a building mode, and the preview in the building mode is okay. It's pretty decent to work with, but it isn't as realistic as the final render mode. So I'm just saving the image, and we'll have a quick look at the GPU performance there. And you can see basically when you go to actual final render mode, the image quality will be an awful lot better than just the kind of working mode preview that you see. So in some ways that's quite satisfying. It does make it a little bit harder to fine tune the images. You've got to kind of flick between build mode and render mode, but it definitely helps. Now I'm going for some really fine detail plants here in the foreground, just so I can get that lovely sort of detail there. Let's just tidy those up a tiny bit there, and we'll go for a couple more of those because I really like those particular types of plants there. So I think choosing the right kind of plants for your scene is really important. I've got a bit of a tendency, as you can see here while I'm playing around, probably to overpopulate the scene a little. But you'll see how the images come out, and they do look really cool at the end. So wait and see. So I'm going to try out some people. Now, I'm always in two minds about putting animated people in the scene. They immediately create a focal point, and if they don't look right, they can actually ruin the whole scene. So I'm not sure we're going to go for those just at the moment. But it's worth a try, and it does create something that you can kind of perhaps imagine people living there or get a bit more life in the scene. So we're just going to adjust the lighting a little bit here, see how that looks. Swing that round just so we can kind of get some sun onto the building. And that's really nice, the way we've got some sun coming from the camera and into the building. So I really do like the custom sort of presets that you can choose with Lumion, the different styles. These make it super easy for beginners essentially to get a really nice look and feel to their renderings. Now you can move beyond this and start to kind of customize the different special effects much more later on, But just to begin with, just to go for some of those customs, really going to get you started and helps you learn some of the sort of tips about getting a really nice looking image. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add some more detailed graphs to the sort of site model. Now this will take a little while to load in because it's a pretty big area, but you'll see it will make quite a big difference to the landscape and the grass, especially when we go to the final quality renders. You won't notice a lot of difference in the preview, but yeah, this is looking good, so this could be quite a nice shot. Let's go and work at this area a little bit more off the view. There's a really good library of cars that you can drop in. So a bit like the people, I'm not 100% sure sometimes about cars, but let's give it a go and see how it looks. We can always remove it later if needed, some of the final renders. But yeah, they're kind of neat to try and play with. So let's see, let's just drag in maybe one more person, just try this. The good thing is you can try it out, and if you don't like it, you can kind of easily remove it later. So the little animated people are quite sweet. They do bring a bit of motion to the model. I think where they look best actually is when you sort of put them in the background. So for example, like let's put a couple of people inside the building here. Yeah, she's walking around doing some shopping, so I'm not quite sure she's the right character there. But I think it's good just to create a little bit of life and sort of some interest in the scene. And I think that can help quite a bit. Okay, so I think what we'll do now is we'll work on the interior a little bit. So I've taken a snapshot, I'm going to go through and look at a realistic style. And you can see it does render pretty fast already. Within a few seconds it goes from a sort of preview mode where we're working to, really quite a realistic scene. Let's go back onto the image again. As soon as it sort of kicks in and does the re-rendering of the preview, it looks so much nicer, and I really like the single point perspective. So that's cool. Now you can spot things like the ceiling. I can see that's not right at the moment, so I'll swap that out shortly. Let's just drag in a few items of furniture from the library as well. Again, with things like libraries of furniture, it's always great that these softwares come with good libraries, but there's always a few more things that you need, so remember that you can import those as separate files and things. But I don't want too much, I just want to create a little bit of visual interest in this particular view and space. So going back to that ceiling, let's sort out this material here. Just go for something a bit more sort of straightforward plaster type wall or ceiling finish. Some really good sort of plasters here. That looks a lot better already. And really that's pretty much it, I think. Apart from a tiny bit more furniture, I feel like one sort of key piece of furniture, yeah, nice sort of famous architectural iconic sort of piece of furniture there, just sort of gazing out the window. That'll be enough actually for this particular image, I think. The lighting is quite a decent library. It's not as comprehensive as some other real-time rendering software, for example Twinmotion, but the good thing is you can adjust all of these, and again you can see that you can get a reasonably decent preview of what it's going to be like. But to be honest, you will need to look at the final render options just to kind of get a real feel for what impact this lighting is going to have on your visual. So it's not, quite as intuitive as some other software in that sense. So once you click there, you can see it's well overlit. So I do actually need to delete some of those lights now. But in the preview, it's not too bad actually. It's a little bit hard to tell sometimes. So I'm just going to tone down the brightness of some of those images. And it's very easy to adjust things like the coloration and the angle as you would expect. And if you do want to, you can adjust multiple lights at the same time. That makes life a little bit easier as well. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go through and just sort of frame up this snapshot a tiny bit more and explore maybe a preset looking at the dawn type of rendering. And that looks really nice, although I can definitely see that my lighting is way too bright, those spotlights. So let's just fine tune those and delete a couple. And let's have another look back at the render now. Yeah, it's looking good, but still a bit bright. I think we'll delete that particular one. And we'll just readjust those existing ones. Yeah, let's make that a little bit less powerful, this particular light. And reduce its brightness and power. So you've got to kind of be a little bit patient with the way you work with the lighting, I found, with Lumion. It's definitely something that, you can kind of improve at. And once you begin to understand the benefit of how to work with those lights, then you get more experienced. So I think we're kind of just exploring, see if there's any more furniture items we need, maybe a little table over there. But I think that's pretty much it for this image. I don't want to overcomplicate it, I want to make it nice and simple and make the main focus out onto the beautiful garden out beyond. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, we'll just kind of keep refining this image. I think we'll delete that light. Let's change the flooring. You know, things like a nice sort of polished floor or kind of parquet floor is what I'm looking for. So that will make a big difference to the character of this image straight away. And hopefully we can get some nice sort of reflectivity on there as well. So that's looking cool. Basically, let's move outside again. We'll kind of just pan around to a different aspect of the building. And I really like this one because it sort of really shows how the building is sort of nestled into the landscape. So let's just kind of work through. Let's just frame that one up again. And it's kind of easy to, should we say, tweak and adjust the views as you go. Now, I do like the idea of creating a sort of night shot for that one. So let's go through. There's our interior scene. So it's always good to just review the images as we go. And you're going to want to do some test rendering along the way. You know, don't get too hung up on making final renders straight away. It's pretty important just to kind of render out these images, and then you can be kind of self-critical and look at them. So that's what I've done here. So having looked at those images, which I'm not going to show you yet, I'm going to kind of work up this image a little bit more here. I do like this viewpoint. I think it's particularly nice. So I'm just going to play around with some of the Lumion rocks, and these are particularly nice, particularly that one with the kind of moss. Just be careful how you place them to try and get them to look quite natural. So let's keep exploring the library. Let's add a few more varieties of plants into this rather lush green garden here. As I say, it is easy to get a bit carried away with the libraries, but it's kind of fun. And all we're really doing here is just exploring Lumion, just to sort of see, you know, what we can create in terms of visuals. So it's good to try things out, I think is what I'm saying. So I'm not really going for a perfect CGI, but actually, as you'll see, I'm really, really impressed and super pleased with the final results of the image. So I think we need a little bit of kind of visual interest here on this sort of little patio here. So I'm just going to drag in a couple of nice sort of sun loungers here and then move those and duplicate them by holding the control key down. What else do we need? I think we need like a little table as well. So let's just scroll down through. So yeah, the library that you get is sort of okay. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't want to use, to be fair. As I say, it's not a bad starting point, but you can make them into favourites. So when you find the ones that you do actually like, you can favourite them. I'm just going to drag in some little spotlights here. They're pretty neat, and that'll add a nice little bit of detail into the garden to actually kind of, you know, pick out a little bit of detail there. I'm not 100% sure whether they'll actually light the model. So I'm just going to place some wall lights here, just up on this wall. And again, you can see how fast I'm doing this. One thing that you will notice, you can see almost like a sort of linear perspective line coming up. And that's actually really good because it really helps you line things up when you're working in perspective. That's a really neat feature that Lumion has. So definitely quite an impressive way to actually place things in 3D. That can be quite tricky in some other software. So we're just exploring the libraries, there's plenty here, and you will find that you get more experienced in choosing the right furniture and right items from the library as time goes on. But you know, early days, and we're just kind of playing around with some of the features here. So this sort of lounger here could look pretty cool against this corner, just to add a little bit more detail to some of the scenes from the other angles. So what else do we need? I think we'll kind of zoom in, we'll just sort of frame up an image here. So let's take a snapshot. And let's have another look at the different types of rendering. We're going to go for a realistic look on this particular scene. And now we've kind of seen how that looks in realistic mode, we'll just kind of carry on building and adding a few more plants to the foreground here. So I'm just going to zoom back a little bit so that I can actually place those plants. I have noticed that sometimes the tool palettes get in the way. So when you're trying to drag objects in, you can often click on buttons and place things. They can be a little bit sort of in front of where you're trying to work. Twinmotion doesn't have that problem because it has a window that you work in and a dock at the bottom. So that's definitely something I like about Twinmotion. Having said that, you know, I am enjoying the speed at which you can work in the library. and move around to the different various modes once you get used to them. So we're just going to go ahead and add a little bit of life in terms of a few birds and things. I think you can see there's a bunch of sort of silhouetted people, as well as the animated and realistic sort of 2D ones as well. So definitely explore those libraries, but I'm quite keen to keep this quite minimal. So what we're going to do is going to re-render out these images now, and sort of just have a look at the final sort of preview. So as it renders the final images, it goes through a sampling sequence and you can see 1 to 64 frames on this particular image. Now this is a pretty good size of image, and it's estimating that it will kind of take probably 2 or 3 minutes to render, so it's not a bad amount of time at all. You can see actually 1.5 minutes it's looking at. So it's well worth kind of just playing around to see how long the render time is going to be, and that will mainly depend on the GPU that you have available. Okay, so let's go back to build mode. We can begin to refine our image a bit more. I think we definitely need a few more trees up on this sort of banked area behind the building. That was one thing that I picked up when I rendered the final still. There was some sort of trees floating in the sky, some of those ones that came through from Vectorworks actually, but I've kind of left them in because the quality of them is not too bad. You can see we've got a couple of trees floating up in the air here as well, so let's delete those and tidy those images up. So yeah, you've always got to kind of render out the final images just to do a bit of a sanity check and just check that you're not messing things up by having a tree floating in the sky or something like that. But I really do love the quality of the trees in Lumion. They are absolutely excellent. They've done a great job on this library, and I do think it really adds to the context of your models. So let's just kind of work on this particular view now. This could be quite a nice little view, looking at the building almost from the approach. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a snapshot, as I've said before, just to kind of line up the shot that you're thinking of doing, and maybe look at the style of rendering, and that will help you inform how you actually build and work up the image itself. Because there really is no point in working on areas of the scene that you're actually not going to see. You don't want to spend hours working on some area that you're not going to do a view from. So it makes sense to choose the views quite early on, and then think about the composition and how you would like those to be. So you can see we just changed the HDRI background. We've gone for a nice sort of polygon real sky there, just to create some nice sort of clouds in the background for this particular image. And we're going to go through and plant out this garden a bit more. Sometimes it's a really good idea also, you can see I can hide these rough edges of this sort of drive that was modelled in Vectorworks of that sort of area there. So things like that in Lumion, dead easy to do. You can just sort of hide those loose edges that perhaps were difficult to solve in the modelling software by placing a couple of well-placed plants or trees. We can kind of not worry about them too much. So that makes a big difference when you're actually creating your images. Just adding a little bit more detail with the rocks and things. Just create a bit of a kind of rockery here with some nice plants in the foreground as well. And then what we'll do is we'll just whiz back to the image. I think we'll frame that up a tiny bit more. We'll go for perspective correction on this particular one. Now, I'm just trying out the chromatic aberrations. Yeah, they're pretty cool. They definitely give you a slightly more sort of photographic look, but I think maybe for this particular one I'll tone them down a bit. Depth of field is another aspect that you really don't see too much in the viewport when you're working in build mode, but it can make a big difference to the final output. But it's a little bit hard to gauge on the preview in Lumion, so yeah, I definitely recommend you need to get more experience and try that one out. So we're going to render out this particular image here. Let's make this image 8, I think. We'll save this one out. So again, have a look at the sampling. It's taking a few moments to sample. And actually what I've noticed is the first frame takes quite a bit of time, and then it will speed up quite dramatically. So we're going to take a look at the animation side now. You can see I've already started taking a few frames of my first animation, and it's very straightforward. I just adjust the view, click the plus sign just to create a keyframe. So let's go ahead and move around to another point of view. And I do remember this being quite a nice aspect here. I want to kind of pan across. So just get myself sort of lined up, click plus, pan sideways across using the D key on the keyboard, and then click plus again. And you can see because I've only got 2 keyframes, it's pretty nice and smooth. So we can easily add a bit more time just to smooth up that animation a bit. And again, the preview that you see in the viewport is a little bit jerky and a bit rough. but it will be a lot smoother when we render out the final animation. So that could be quite a nice starting point for an animation. With a gentle move forward, just 2 keyframes and a really nice amount of time, so it's nice and smooth. Let's just preview that. Yeah, it's looking cool. So we'll click tick. So those are my 3 video clips I'm happy with so far. We might make a few more later, but let's go and edit this one and make this a bit simpler by deleting a couple of keyframes. So yeah, I'm just kind of easing in. And you can see with the right amount of time, it's actually quite smooth. So I think what we'll do, we'll go back, we'll keep working on this area. With all these 3D software packages, one thing that I will really recommend, it's a very iterative approach. As you're working, you often spot things such as that rough edge, which kind of can really spoil an image if you're not careful. So I would recommend that you be quite self-critical. Given enough time, you can kind of render out some, first try images, and then when you actually look at those, you can kind of go back into them and see what the image needs. So I'm just dragging in a couple of these nice papyrus plants. They're pretty nice, and I do love the cordyline spikies, very architectural type of plants. Some of those, grasses and things, they're super detailed. And again, they're very nice when you put them in the foreground, so you get some nice sort of detailed grass. You can see in the final render they look absolutely awesome. So yeah, I think that's the key, is have some nice sort of planting in the foreground, really nice sort of lighting on the building in the background, but don't overdo it. And maybe I am for this particular image, but well, let's wait and see. We can always kind of delete stuff later on. But I'm just keen to create a really kind of lush feel for this sort of garden, something quite sort of naturalistic almost in many ways. And I'm just going to create my final sort of tent still here. So that's really cool. We're going to go for another night scene, I think, on this one. And the presets really do make it very easy to create super stunning images without a huge amount of effort. So let's go ahead and save our file. And what we're going to do now is just review our images, do any final bits of sort of tweaking to the camera, just sort of get down to maybe that final lower camera position. Yeah, this one here looks pretty good. I might do a bit more work on that in the foreground in terms of sort of a bit more planting. Yeah, that looks absolutely fantastic. Really happy with that. Got our internal view here. It's looking okay, a little bit barren perhaps, but it's not too bad as a starting point, quite minimalist. So we'll keep that one. Don't think I need that one, so we'll delete that one. That's very similar. That's a nice view, sort of straight onto the building. Yeah, I like that with the night version as well. And that's a really nice sort of daytime version. So yeah, we'll kind of like remove that one because we've got a couple of those already. So I'm going to render out all the final stills, and here is the final results of the images and animations put together for you in our Ecohome Lumion animation series. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.